Hello there, friends. Welcome back to another episode of Generation Tech. My name is Alan, and to my fellow Americans, happy Independence Day. When George Washington gave his farewell speech, he warned the nation against the dangers of geographical sectionalism and political factionalism. He warned us that, quote, cunning, ambitious, and unprincipled men will be enabled to subvert the power of the people and to usurp for themselves the reins of government. You know, in recent weeks, I know it's been annoying for a lot of you guys that we've been talking so much about the culture war and how it affects the Star Wars community. The truth is, the Star Wars community is probably the least important thing the culture war has touched in the last few decades. But the fact that it has even reached Star Wars at all is a red flag. As an American born to Chinese immigrants, I've always struggled to find myself in one specific community. The flip side to that is I've learned how to adapt to other communities, and throughout my short life, I've managed to find beauty and kindness and compassion in almost every group in America, whether it's liberal or conservative, white, black, brown, and everything else in between. Now, I'm not naive. I know that there are many problems within our country. There are a lot of issues we need to work out, but I've always believed that Americans share much more in common than what is portrayed on social media and in the news. One of my favorite Americans is a musician named Daryl Davis. He's a black man who had the courage to spend the last 30 years of his life befriending KKK members and talking to them like they were human beings, countering racism and ignorance with compassion. He found out that many of these KKK members had never even talked to a black man, and aside from their very racist point of views, they were just normal people. A lot of them were actually kind and friendly to their families and communities. Their hatred and fear came from ignorance. Davis would go on to develop many real friendships with these Klansmen, and he was ultimately able to convince hundreds to leave the Klan directly. This also included several chapter leaders of the KKK who dismantled entire networks of Klansmen, so it's possible he's de-radicalized thousands of Klansmen. In today's social media age, there aren't enough Daryl Davises out there to combat all of the hatred, all of the fear and misinformation. There are a lot of grifters on the internet that seek to divide us, make us a much more chaotic country than we actually are. And you might feel helpless as an individual, but the reality is you can make a change one person at a time, and it all starts with just reaching out to people outside of your own community. Get out of your comfort zone, out of your bubble, out of your safe space, and talk to people, especially people with the opposite political views from you. Don't try to be right in your conversations with them. Just try to find commonalities. And you'll find that, many Americans, we share the same desires. We want a strong economy. We want good jobs. We want safety and security for our families, for our friends. And we don't want war. And so on this July 4th, I challenge you to say no to extreme views, to try and seek compromise, to look towards empathy, courage, and compassion. Anyway, on to the video for today. There will be spoilers in this video from episode 6 of The Acolyte. In our review of episode 6, titled Teach/Corrupt, we examined the duality of Master Soul and Master Qimir. I really like how The Acolyte has subverted the usual narrative that the Jedi are unambiguously good and those who use the Darkside are unambiguously evil. This is an idea that George Lucas started talking about in the prequel era, and now we're finally seeing it get fully fleshed out. It's story elements like this and stories like Andor that make me believe that Star Wars is actually maturing and that we're finally starting to discuss things that might make fans and audiences a little bit more uncomfortable because they reflect the realities of our world. But that is what art is for, isn't it? That is what the sci-fi, fantasy, genre is designed to do. The Jedi Order is clearly the good organization in Star Wars, just like how the Galactic Republic is the antithesis to the Galactic Empire. But my belief has always been if you truly love something, if you truly treasure something, you need to be critical about it. You have to be willing to be honest and discuss the flaws and inherent weaknesses of any system that you support. In the Jedi Order during the High Republic were at the height of their power. They were completely unchallenged and unopposed. When you are at the top, the peak, there is only one direction you can go, and that is down, such is the nature of things. The Jedi's power, ironically, reached its zenith when the Sith were finally destroyed. The Darkside was vanquished from the galaxy, or so they thought. From a Jedi point of view, the light side of the Force is good. Those who used the light side of the Force were servants of the Force and brought balance to the cosmos. Those who tapped into fear, hate, and greed utilized the dark side of the Force. This was seen as a corruption and perversion of the natural order. These beliefs in themselves are not necessarily wrong, but where the Jedi have always misstepped is their misunderstanding of their own role within the Force. It was never their job to police or regulate the Force.
We are concerned that you are training children. The Republic lost.
Brendok is not a part of the Republic.
The universe, the cosmic force, brings balance to itself. It's sentient creatures who wield the Force, both the light and the dark side, like the Jedi and the Sith, that bring the imbalance. And something the Jedi don't understand is it's not just the Sith who are the problem. Any individual who can wield the light side can wield the dark side. It's about how you handle it. It's about how much of the dark side you use, how much of the light side you use. It's about finding balance within. There's really no way to destroy the dark side of the Force. The dark side and the light side are integral to all life. Without the dark side, the light side would blind and burn the galaxy with its brightness. Without death, there could be no light. Without decay, there could be no growth. The Jedi at one point started believing that they, as an organization, were the embodiment of the light side, and the Sith were the embodiment of the dark side. They aren't necessarily wrong with this statement, but in their arrogance, I think they forgot that their side of the conflict could be corrupted, and therefore, it often did become corrupted, in the pursuit of destroying the Sith. I mean, it doesn't take a genius to figure out that the Sith emerged from the Jedi. Even Grandmaster Yoda, who was probably somewhere in the background of the Acolyte, believed that once someone took the dark path, it would dominate their destiny forever due to its addictive nature. We know that Yoda's belief is not true. Anakin Skywalker and many others like him returned from the dark side and regained the light. But this viewpoint about the finality of taking the dark side path is something that a lot of Jedi shared. Especially during the height of the Jedi's power, with the Sith gone, with chaos gone, the Jedi had become increasingly arrogant and focused on eliminating what little presence the dark side had in their order, without realizing that every excessive action you take also triggers a reaction. As I mentioned, we all have the dark side inside of us, some people more than most, which is where we get individuals like Qimir and Osha. A lot of people believe that Qimir is lying to Osha in episode 6, that he is trying to manipulate her to join the dark side. This might be true, but the reason why Osha is falling for this in the first place is because of her experiences with the Jedi. Now, Qimir realized his failures to turn May into his apprentice was rooted in his inability to develop a true bond with May. He kept himself at arm's length away from May, he didn't even show his face, and therefore he misunderstood May. You see, she wasn't here to learn about the Force, she wasn't after power. Instead, what she wanted was revenge against the Jedi who took her sister away from her all those years ago. It's apparent in all the scenes we see of Osha and May when they're little that May truly loves her sister, and the thing that she fears the most is losing her.
How did you know I was here? When I can't find you, I look here. You're with me, I am with you. It isn't fair. I share everything with you, and you hide things from me or run off alone.
And even in adulthood, when May figures out that Osha is alive, that's what she's focused on.
I love you. Don't choose them again.
Qimir throws away May in disgust after realizing this aspect of her. She's not a true follower of the dark side. She utilizes power in order to get back with her sister. She's truly a tragic figure. A simple girl who's lost her entire family, her beloved mothers, and she believes the Jedi are the ones who have caused all of this pain, but she's not some cruel, murdering, rage-filled monster. She's just a little girl with nothing left in her life. And then when she realizes that Osha is alive, well, her priorities change very quickly.
Osha being alive changes everything. My loyalty is to Osha, not your master.
What are you doing?
May is driven by love, and Qimir ultimately can't use May for his purposes. I think Qimir does want power. He might not be a Sith just yet, he might just be a dark Jedi at this point, but it's clear the direction in which he wants to head is the power of two. He's actually quite honest with Osha, despite trying to, manipulate her towards the dark side. But then again, maybe Osha has an affinity with the dark side. You see, whereas May wants normalcy in life, where she wants that structure, she wants her sister to join her in the Witch Coven and follow their mother's footsteps, it was always Osha who was more curious about the outside. She always looked towards adventure. In a lot of ways, she's similar to the Sith because that's also what the Sith want. It's not just about rage and desire and passion, It's about going after what's forbidden, and in Osha's case, the things that are kept away from her is a life outside of the coven.
I don't know if I want to be a witch.
Of course you want that.
No, you want that. I want to have my own things.
Why?
Because I want to do everything together all the time.
But why?
Because we're not the same.
Of course we are.
No, it feels that way because we're the only children here.
I think you would make a very good Jedi, Osha. Would you like to be tested and see if you could become one?
Yes, please. Mother?
Now, Osha ultimately joins the Jedi, but she ends up failing because of things that are completely out of her control. You see, the Jedi judge her not by who she is, but by the experiences she went through, which is kind of messed up.
When did you join the Order?
When I was 8. Lord knows all of this.
A major concern about admitting you to the Order was your age.
And the fact that you were mourning.
I mean, look at how arrogantly the Jedi talk about her life, as if she had any choice in the matter of what happened to her as a child. Anakin Skywalker went through a very similar experience when he joined the Jedi. He was grilled for being too old, too attached to his mother.
Thoughts dwell on your mother.
I miss her.
Afraid to lose her, I think.
What does that got to do with anything?
Everything.
I mean, the Jedi should have realized it's natural for a child to have these connections with their family at such an age, and that it takes time for a child to mature and become less dependent on their primary caretaker. If anything, the Order should have realized just what harm taking a child, a baby, from their birth mother and father could do to them. The Jedi didn't realize that after 1,000 years of peace, that they had become obsessed in an unhealthy way to find the dark side inside of their members. The Jedi didn't realize that they had become fearful, paranoid of something as innocent as a child missing his mom, something as understandable as Osha grieving the loss of her family. You know, all throughout the Acolyte, we see well-meaning individuals in the Jedi Order like Yord and Master Soul judge Osha for her life experiences.
My circumstances were unique, but the Jedi Council made their decision.
You lost your entire family. Your mothers, your sister, your village all died in the fire before Master Soul brought you into the Jedi. Your training was difficult, to say the least. Attachments to those we have lost are the most difficult to let go.
I didn't know you were still so angry.
She killed my family. She destroyed my life.
This is grief. Let it go.
And this is where the Jedi's weakness and arrogance shows the most. You have a damaged child, one who potentially lost her entire family because of the actions of the Jedi. We're not exactly sure about that just yet. And there are no attempts to relate or understand these feelings. Instead, they let the Jedi dogma, the intense fear of emotions and attachment, guide their judgment of her. This is ultimately why Osha failed and left the Jedi, because they deemed this side of her too dangerous to ignore. Despite the fact that Osha as a person, just like Anakin Skywalker, had an entire life ahead of them that could have gone either way. When a person is broken, it takes love and acceptance to heal those wounds, not judgment and rules and regulations. No one wants to be lectured about the dark side. I mean, this, in a lot of ways, was a self-fulfilling prophecy. But then again, what else do you expect from an organization that takes babies from their parents with the sole intention of being in control of their entire education so that they can be indoctrinated, inoculated against the dark side? Attachment can lead to the dark side, grief can lead to the dark side, and love can also lead to the dark side, but only if you don't properly deal with it, only if you let it control you. Osha leaves the Jedi Order not because she doesn't try to come to terms with her grief. She is rejected because she has grief, and that is just plain wrong. This is where Qimir comes into play, of course. Whether his intentions are good or not doesn't really matter at this point. Whether he actually cares about Osha beyond her force powers, we don't know exactly. But what he provides for Osha is something she's probably never experienced, and that is someone who understands her without any judgment.
What you're feeling right now, this anger, this pain, this is who you are. The Jedi saw it, and that's why they threw you away.
They didn't throw me away.
Then why aren't you a Jedi? Why aren't you a Jedi, Osha?
Because I failed!
This is the result of strict dogma. It might have worked for people like Yord, it might have worked for someone a bit more emotional like Jeki, but for many, for individuals like Osha, the system failed. Qimir speaks the truth here to Osha. Whatever his intentions are, he nourishes her in ways the Jedi never could. Because the Darkside has soup.
I understand. I lost everything, Osha. But when you lose everything, that's when you're finally free.
I mean, the funny thing is, when I watched episode 6 when it came out, I was kind of hungry. And so I saw Osha wake up next to that steaming cauldron of soup, and I was drawn towards what was inside. I mean, I expect it was a rich concoction of heavily boiled and broken down nutrients and grub. And if that's what Qimir has to offer, well, it's a lot nicer than the stale saltines that the Jedi Order gives its members. The Jedi give just enough nourishment, spiritually and emotionally, to their members so they don't die inside and become completely inhuman. I mean, can you really fault people like Osha, like Anakin Skywalker, for being lured towards the dark side, when all their lives they've had to fight so hard, struggle to maintain this facade in order to appease, to be accepted by the Jedi? When in reality, it was really the Jedi who should have changed and adapted to their needs. This is the problem with strict dogma. It's unbending, it's irrational, and does not take into account the individuals that do not fit into its rigidity. Is Qimir really being a manipulative individual here, or is he just finding commonalities with Osha? This is, I think, what he really is. I mean, he might be ultimately a bad character, but he can relate to Osha, for sure. I think they have shared experiences, especially if we find out that the Jedi were responsible for the death of Osha's family. Yes, Qimir ambushed those Jedi. It wasn't self-defense, he was on the attack, but what do we know of his story? What about that horrendous wound on his back? He's living life as a hermit, hiding in a cave on a remote planet. What has driven him to where he is? Why does he despise the Jedi so much?
Where'd you get that scar?
How do you think I got it?
Looks like someone stabbed you in the back.
Someone who threw me away?
I have a pretty good idea what gave him the scars on his back, and I don't think it was the Sith. We'll talk more about this in another video, of course. You know, there's no such thing as a perfect order. There's no such thing as utopia, and those who promise it are full of shit. When we see an organization like the Jedi so high and mighty, so free of balance and opposition, it should make us question what they're hiding, what rot is festering beneath the surface, because that is what happens when you remove the people who tell you you stink from your orbit. Well guys, I hope you enjoyed today's video. Don't forget to subscribe and hit that notification button down below so you don't miss out on the rest of our awesome content. As usual, my name is Alan, reminding you that my allegiance is to the Republic, to democracy. See you next time.